Most people who feel uncomfortable in their own skin turn to therapy, community, or time. One man decided the fix was an unregulated peptide, a tanning bed schedule, and a legal name change. Aaron Joseph Janowitzki was born white, raised ginger, and is now legally named Nuka Zeus. He spent years injecting an off-label erectile dysfunction drug to darken his skin, declared himself a black supremacist, built an online following around the whole project, and has cycled through statements that range from deeply bizarre to genuinely alarming, all while insisting, with total sincerity, that none of it is a performance. What makes his story impossible to look away from is not just the surface-level spectacle of a pale ginger man transforming his appearance through experimental injections. It is the fact that behind all of it is a person whose motivations are rooted in something real, and whose choices have produced something genuinely difficult to categorize. Behind the name and the persona is a man who grew up in two very different Americas. He was born in New York, lived there until he was about 10 years old, and then moved with his family to a small town in the South where, by his own account, the racial geography was impossible to ignore. He has described his parents as people other people would call Caucasian or Italian Sicilian, though he personally considers them human rather than white, a distinction that will become important later. He attended the Art Institute and a couple of other colleges before dropping out, describing the academic path as simply not the one for him. From his earliest years, he says he gravitated toward black friends at every school he attended, not because he was making a political statement, but because that was simply who he connected with. When asked to explain it, his answer was not complicated. He just connected more, and he never fully understood why until the rural South made the question unavoidable.
I mean, I've always been around black people my whole entire life. My first friends, like ever, when my parents first sent me to daycare, there's a black guy there. He became my best friend, and my parents were friends with their friend or his friends, and it's just like, it seems like I bounced around different schools, and it's like every school that I went to, I always gravitated to the black people for some reason. And it's just, I just connected more with them. I don't know.
His sister used to tease him for being lighter skinned than the rest of the family, telling him he was adopted. That detail sounds minor, but he has brought it up in multiple interviews as a genuine source of pain, connecting it to a desire for darker skin that he says began as early as middle school.
I've always felt a little different, and I always felt like I wanted to have darker skin. My whole family has darker skin than me, and my sister used to tease me and say I wasn't part of the family, say I was adopted because I was so light-skinned. And I just wanted to be like all my friends and stuff like that. So in middle school, I started thinking about doing plastic surgery to become, see if I can do the opposite of Michael Jackson.
By middle school, he was already researching plastic surgery to darken his appearance, describing it as wanting to do the opposite of what Michael Jackson did. He eventually dropped that idea, but the desire never left, and when he found out about Melanotin 2 years later, he says it was like the answer he had been waiting for his whole life. He has also been diagnosed with ADHD and SVT, a heart condition that causes his heart to pump harder and faster than normal. Both of these details matter more than they might seem when you understand what he later chose to inject into his body. There's a detail worth sitting on here before moving forward. A kid who says he never noticed racial division until he was forced to pick a side is a very different starting point than the finished persona people meet today. The gap between those two versions of him is really the whole story. The most formative chapter in the Nuka Zeus story is not the injections. It is what happened when a kid who thought everyone was human moved to a town that was divided into two separate worlds and had never questioned that division. He walked into his new school and found black students on one side of the campus and white students on the other, with no middle ground and no one who seemed confused about which side they belonged to. He says he did not know where to go because he had genuinely never seen the world divided that way before.
Down to the South, I didn't know there was a difference between people. I thought we were all human. So but I moved to a town that was very segregated, had nothing but white and black people. There was no Mexicans, no mixed people, no Chinese, no Indians, just white and black. And nobody each other. You know what I'm saying? So when I walked to the school, you know what I'm saying? All the blacks were on one side and all the whites were on the other. And I was confused. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to sit. And
the white students decided for him, not with kindness. They threatened him for spending time with black students, called him racial slurs. This happened repeatedly, not as isolated incidents, but as a sustained pattern of harassment.
White people, they were giving me a lot of shit. They were like, why you keep hanging out with them, and, saying slurs like that, and it just started turning into like something big. And they kept telling me,
He has said that what he went through in that town is the origin of his hatred for white people, and that understanding this extremism requires understanding that it did not emerge from nowhere. He also revealed that his response to that harassment eventually escalated into what he vaguely refers to as a school incident, the details of which he says he is saving for a future documentary.
And then watching all my people, you know what I'm saying, go through it all the time, you know what I'm saying, I was like, I had enough of it. You know, I felt like, what else was I supposed to do, or what would anybody else in my position do? You know what I'm saying? I wanted to get rid of this evil that was, you know, being directed toward me and the rest of my people. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and strike back, and that was the whole school incident.
Okay.
Other details I'm not going to get into because I'm saving that for the documentary.
He was incarcerated at 13 years old, spending time in a juvenile facility where, by his account, he was told that using a specific racial slur was how you earned respect. This is the period he points to when explaining how certain language entered his vocabulary, and he has said that as he got older, he pulled back from it, though it still occasionally slips out. None of this excuses what came later, but it does explain why a person with a traumatic history of racial violence in the American South might develop extreme views. The problem is that his response to being victimized by racism was to build his own ideology of racial hatred, pointed in the other direction. The drug at the center of his transformation is Melanotin 2, a synthetic peptide that was originally developed to treat erectile dysfunction and certain skin conditions. The relevant side effect is that it accelerates the body's melanin production when combined with UV exposure, making skin darken significantly faster when the person goes into the sun. He says he first heard about it through a friend who showed him footage of Martina Big, a white German woman who used the same drug to dramatically darken her skin over time. His first reaction was that it was fake. When he found out it was real, he filed the information away and did not act on it immediately. What pushed him to actually try it was not curiosity or ambition. He has said on camera that about a year after learning about the drug, he was actively considering and decided to try the injections in a kind of last resort logic.
I've seen pictures on the internet, you know, floating around here and there, and I thought it was fake. And one of my friends was showing me Martina Big, and I was like, that's fake, that ain't real. And they're like, no, that's real. And then I thought about the injections, but I never pursued it. And then about a year later, I was thinking about committing, and I was like, you know what I'm saying, I'm gonna try the drug.
He began documenting the process on his YouTube channel from the very first week. On day 7, he was still visibly pale, describing the side effects, including fatigue and the unexpected disappearance of his drive, which he noted with some disappointment. By day 50, he was measurably darker and said he loved what he was seeing. He combined the injections with tanning beds every other day, lying in the sun for an hour in the days in between, and bronzing lotions that he later admitted were turning him orange rather than dark. The full routine was intensive and entirely self-managed because his doctor had already told him to stop. The result after 100 days was a transformation substantial enough that people who saw early videos side by side with later ones were genuinely startled. Whatever opinion you held about why he was doing it, the visual change was real and significant, and it was enough to push his content into viral territory. It's worth stepping outside his own commentary for a moment to look at what this drug actually is, since he treats it fairly casually in his videos, even though it was never approved for cosmetic tanning by any major regulatory body. Melanotin 2 works by mimicking a hormone that triggers melanin production, and it is sold almost entirely through unregulated online suppliers rather than pharmacies. Because it is not FDA approved for this use, there is no standard dosing guidance, no quality control on what is actually in the vials people are injecting, and no long-term safety data on repeated high-dose use over years. That absence of oversight is exactly why his doctor refused to help him monitor it, and exactly why he was left guessing about how much was too much. The side effects he mentions casually in interviews, nausea, spontaneous erections, mood changes, are the ones documented in medical case reports, but they are the milder end of what has been recorded. There are separate documented concerns about the drugs accelerating the growth of existing moles, which raises questions about skin cancer risk that never come up in any of his videos. None of this means his transformation was fake or that the visual results were not real. It means the risk he downplays as a minor inconvenience is, by any outside medical standard, a lot closer to the top of the danger scale than the bottom. What started as a monthly injection gradually became something his body demanded far more frequently. By the time he was describing his situation, a dose that once lasted a month and a half was now lasting 5 days before his skin started to lighten noticeably.
So originally, an injection would last you a month, but as you kept doing it, now you have to do it every 5 days.
Right. It actually started being more than a month. It started off at like a month and a half a vial would last me, and I just keep upping my dose, and now it's at the point where it's 5 days, and I want to up it more, but I'm not sure how dangerous that is. People are already telling me that I'm taking high dosages. I need to be careful of my liver. I need to be careful of my blood-brain barrier. So, and there's nobody out there to talk to. to be like, what's the maximum you can take?
He openly admitted in multiple interviews that he was already past the dosage levels anyone was recommending, and that there was no medical guidance available for how high someone could go safely on an experimental drug in this unregulated. He wanted to increase the dose further, but said he was not sure how dangerous that would be. He did try to involve a doctor at one point, going to his primary care physician, and asking for help managing the side effects and monitoring his liver. The doctor's response was straightforward: stop taking it.
I tried going to one of my primary care doctors, and I told them about it, and they told me to stop taking it because that was back when I had anxiety for it. And I was like, look, can you give me something to stop with this anxiety? And they were like, no, I'm not going to give you anything to mask side effects of this. If you don't like it, stop taking it.
The known risks he has cited himself include liver damage, disruption of the blood-brain barrier, cardiovascular complications, and permanent erectile dysfunction. Given that he was also dealing with SVT, a condition that already stresses the heart, the cardiovascular risk was not theoretical, but layered directly onto a pre-existing medical issue. When asked whether he would regret losing function permanently because of the injections, he said he had been thinking about it for weeks and genuinely did not have an answer. That was not evasion. It was the honest response of someone who had accepted that a bad outcome was possible and had decided to continue anyway. He summarized his philosophy about this directly. He would rather live a short life full of experiences than a long life with nothing in it. That statement is easy to read as performative bravado, but the consistency with which he returns to it across years of interviews suggests he actually means it. The injections were only one part of a much larger identity project. Running alongside the physical transformation was a complete overhaul of everything else: his name, his car, his house, his music, and his stated political beliefs. He legally changed his name to Nuka Zeus Nadama and began referring to his former name as history that no longer applied to him. He stated boldly in an interview that he no longer recognized his birth name, stating that it was gone and did not matter.
What's your birth name, by the way? You don't have to give me the last name. Just what's your
I don't even want to go into that. It doesn't even matter. That's history. It's gone.
It was probably like Matthew or Luke or something.
He got 2 tattoos that he considers one continuous message. He originally wanted the second tattoo to say Whitey, but a friend talked him down to the current version literally minutes before the tattooing started. He was turned down 3 times by tattoo artists before someone finally agreed to do the work. He painted his car, which he called the Black Mobile, in red, black, and green with Black Power imagery, the Black Panther logo on the badge, Tupac lyrics on one side. He carved the profiles of Malcolm X and MLK into the hedges outside his house, and painted his home with Black Power logos. One exterior wall featured a painting of himself KKK members. Whatever you think of the ideology, there's a strange kind of dedication in someone who puts that level of craft into their hedge art. He described himself in multiple interviews as a black supremacist without hesitation, saying he believes black people are superior in every way imaginable. When pressed on what that meant specifically, he said every way, full stop, and did not elaborate further because the answer was the answer. There is a line in the Nuka Zeus story where the material stops being eccentric and starts being something that deserves a different kind of attention. He crossed that line multiple times, and on camera, he fired camera during an Instagram livestream after accusing followers of harassing his friends. He explained that he fired it as a warning: stop messing with his people, or that was what they would get. He framed it as a protection rather than a threat. There's also a video on his YouTube channel in which he appears to be distressed in reference to the serious incident involving another person. When asked about it directly, he declined to discuss it and said it was not an open case, which is not the same thing as saying it did not happen. He has also compared his devotion to his cause to the mentality of saying he understands why people for their people, and that he would do the same.
It's for the people. You know what I'm saying? I understand why do what they do. You know what I'm saying? They do it for their people. You know what I'm saying? I understand that now because I'm willing to do anything for my people. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm selfless. I care about myself, yes, but the greater cause is bigger.
These are not throwaway comments made in a single bad moment. They appear across multiple platforms, multiple interviews, and multiple years, which means they are not isolated outbursts, but a documented pattern that runs through his entire public persona. One of the clearest examples of how Nuka Zeus's logic collapses under the slightest examination is his position on interracial relationships, which he laid out clearly in some of his interviews. He said he has no problem with black men dating white women, because in his view, that reduces the white population going forward, which he considers a positive outcome. But he strongly objects to white men dating black women because he sees that as diluting black genetics. There was, however, one obvious problem. Nuka Zeus himself primarily dates black women, and his DNA is still genetically what it is regardless of how dark his skin becomes from injections. Every child he fathers with a black woman carries that genetic material, which by his own logic means he is doing exactly what he objects to when white men do it. His response to this was to say he was not white, just human, and then acknowledge that he did not know what to say about the genetic reality of the situation. He has already confirmed he has children, women. He declined to say how many, or with whom. He did say they are black. The interracial dating position is a good illustration of the broader pattern in his thinking. He holds firm views with passionate conviction right up until the moment those views are applied to him personally, at which point there are suddenly exceptions and complications that need more thought. The Nuka Zeus story inevitably gets compared to Rachel Dolezal, the white woman who presented herself as black while leading an NAACP chapter, until she was publicly exposed. His initial reaction to her was hostile. He says he talked badly about her for years before actually sitting down with her. He said he now saw no problem with what she was doing, and stated that she was only working for the community. He also said she should be allowed to be black if she wants to be.
At first, I disliked her. I hated her, you know what I'm saying? I talked about her all the time, and for quite a few years. But I had a chance to actually sit down and talk to her and, one-on-one and hear her full story and everything. And I understand, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I have no problem with her now, you know what I'm saying? I mean, she's trying to do something for black people, so what's wrong with that?
He rejects the label transracial that gets applied to both of them, and his reasoning is actually internally consistent, even if it is hard to accept on the surface. He says transracial implies a transformation from one thing to another, and he does not consider himself to be transforming because he was never white in any meaningful sense.
I'm not doing a transformation. I am not transforming from one thing to another. I have always been me. I'm just darkening my skin. It's the same thing if somebody wants to dye their hair, or if someone wants to grow out their beard or gain muscles, you know what I'm saying? I'm just doing something for me.
But neither the comparison to Dolezal nor the transracial debate fully captures the specific thing that makes his case different from hers. He went to physical lengths she did not, and in doing so he made the question of authenticity versus performance harder to dismiss as simply a matter of hairstyle and community involvement. Dolezal never injected anything into her body, never got tattoos declaring war on her own birth race, and never described a willingness to die for the cause the way he consistently has. Whatever conclusion you land on about either of them, they are not really the same phenomenon, just wearing different faces, and lumping them together flattens what actually makes his case distinct. He refers to white people consistently as cave beasts, a term he has used across YouTube videos, interviews, and public statements, without apparent concern for how it lands. When asked about it directly in one of his interviews, he described it as a polite way of saying something far less polite.
Yeah, it's a nice way to, the oppressor, in a nice way, you know what I'm saying? Instead of, I don't know, it's a nice term to, say, you know?
The term matters not just as an insult, but as a window into how his belief system is structured. He has a framework for thinking about white people that divides them into those who are human, meaning people who have proven they are not racist, and those who are white, meaning people who embody what he sees as the core definition of whiteness: evil, racist, and historically oppressive. Under this framework, his own parents and sister are not white. They are human. When pressed on whether this means good white people exist, he said all white people start as guilty until proven innocent, and that once they prove themselves, they can be reclassified. He acknowledged he could not fully explain how someone born a certain way could overcome the genetics he considers inferior, and said he did not know how to answer that. One of the less discussed parts of the Nuka Zeus story is that he actually lived in Africa for a period before any injections began. He stated that he wants dual citizenship in an African country, which he declined to specify because he did not want online harassment to interfere with the application. His dream is to walk across the entire continent with a backpack, visiting every country, though he has already been stopped at multiple borders for not having the correct visas.
What country were you in?
I don't want to give out the specifics yet because I am working on my dual citizenship and I don't want haters to that up. But I want to go everywhere. I've been to a couple places, but I want to go everywhere. I want to literally go with a backpack on my back and just walk across the whole continent and go to every country and just experience everything everywhere.
He points out that he was braiding his hair since he was 11 or 12, rapping since around the same age, and dreaming of Africa since childhood, all before any injections. The injections, in his view, are the only thing that has actually changed, and he finds it telling that people only started questioning his identity once his skin got darker. The COVID-19 pandemic interrupted his planned return to the continent, and he has said that as soon as conditions allowed, he intended to go back and not return. Whether that has happened or not is unclear, since he remains a presence in American online spaces, and continues to reference American cultural and political dynamics. There's an odd tension worth naming here. A man who says he wants nothing more to do with America, who dreams of dual citizenship on another continent, keeps getting pulled back by a video game tournament scene and a sick father. Ideology is the loudest part of his story, but it is rarely the part actually steering his decisions. Beyond the activism and the injections, Nuka Zeus has also positioned himself as a musician, releasing tracks under his new identity that mixes political messaging with more mundane subject matter. His discography includes songs about wishing for darker skin, and in an entirely different register, at least one track about bathroom humor from years earlier in his career. He has performed freestyle raps on camera during interviews, treating them as proof of authenticity rather than just entertainment, as though the ability to freestyle settles a larger question about identity. Whether or not that logic holds up, the freestyles themselves have become some of the more shared and mocked clips associated with him online. The music never became a serious career path in the way his skin transformation or his political persona did. Still, it is a consistent thread through nearly a decade of his content, going back to well before the injections started. That continuity is actually part of his own argument. He says the interests and habits people now treat as evidence of racial performance were present in his life long before anyone had a reason to accuse him of anything. Away from the racial politics entirely, there is a separate, much pettier thread in his story worth mentioning, because it shows a different side of the same personality. Someone who feels wronged easily and processes it publicly on camera. In one video, he goes after a person he calls Yoshi, who apparently hired him for 3 weeks of behind-the-scenes filming work. His complaint is detailed and specific. He says he was never given a schedule or agenda for the job, was placed in a separate car from the person he was supposed to be filming during a 10-hour road trip, and was at one point left behind at an Airbnb while the person he worked for went to an event without him. He frames the entire situation as Yoshi not understanding what behind-the-scenes filming actually requires, and closes the video promising 99 more episodes, an album, comedy skits, and possibly a book, none of which appear to have materialized in any significant way since. That pattern of publicly processing personal crisis becomes much more serious in a separate video, where he describes an accident that would have sent most people straight to an emergency room. He explains that weeks earlier in Texas, he was riding a motorized scooter, swerved to avoid a pothole, and hit his head hard on the pavement in the middle of the road. Rather than seeking medical attention immediately, he got back on the scooter and kept going, saying he was in a rush and felt okayish at the time, deciding the sore face and mild headache were manageable enough to push through. The following day, riding the same scooter, he described every small bump in the road causing what he called a half-second blackout, paired with pain, comparing the sensation to being punched and knocked out repeatedly. That is a serious symptom, and it is one that, by his own account, he still did not treat as reason enough to go to a hospital. Instead, he turned to an AI chatbot for medical guidance, describing his symptoms, and being told that since a week had passed without the headaches worsening, he was probably fine. He has been candid that he knows this isn't really a substitute for medical care, but says it was what he had available at the time.
Ever since then, I've had a small headache, not a big one, but a small-ish headache, and not a normal kind of headache. It's like a different kind of headache. And I asked, when I got back home, I asked ChatGPT about it. I was like, it's been about a week since the injury. And, I told Chat what was going on and how I was feeling, and I gave it all the details. And it said that since it's been a week, I should be fine. My head should be fine as long as the headaches aren't getting worse.
Weeks later, in a moment of what reads as real vulnerability, he described a day where the pain was bad enough that he got dressed, gathered his wallet and keys, and prepared to go to the hospital or call for help, while also admitting he did not fully trust himself to drive, and did not want to call an ambulance because of both the cost and what he described as embarrassment. He also disclosed elevated vital signs during that same video, an increased pulse and blood pressure reading on the higher end, while asking viewers specifically not to comment, telling him to go get checked out, saying it might just be anxiety. All this goes to show how he takes unnecessary risks at the expense of his health if he deems it fit. Taking those FDA-banned tanning injections is not just to make him black, as he always says, but a way for him to take an unnecessary risk at the expense of his health. After all, he had already threatened to commit once. Nuka Zeus has been viewed as strange and criticized by almost everyone outside of his social circle, but the people inside his social circle who claim to have actually spent real time with him, on calls, in person, and behind the scenes, tell a very different story. One creator who spent 40 minutes on a video call with him admitted he expected the whole thing to be fraudulent going in, some kind of act, but came away saying the feelings seemed legitimate and the intentions seemed good, and that he would genuinely hang out with the guy if he ran into him.
I was on a Discord video call with Zeus for like 40 minutes today, and that was dude, and the first thing I said to my manager Alex, the first thing I said when I walked out, I was like, Zeus is kind of the homie. I was like, hold on, what the
A friend closer to the black community context around him made a more specific point. He was initially skeptical when Nuka first mentioned wanting to get the melanin injections, assuming it was a joke, but said she wouldn't put it past him, given how deeply Nuka had already rooted himself in advocacy and conversation around the community for years beforehand.
So when he initially told us, he wanted the melanin shots, I thought it was kind of a joke, but I was like, I really wouldn't put it past just because of how rooted he is in the African American community.
Several people in the compilation make a similar argument from a slightly different angle, saying that just because he cannot always articulate his reasoning as smoothly as other people expect does not make him less sincere, and that judging someone's internal identity from the outside is its own kind of arrogance.
Another tip, I am not offended by him getting tanning injections to make his skin darker. While it may be a little weird to a lot of people and initially weird to some of his friends, he's definitely being genuine. Just because he's not able to articulate it as well as most people are, and just because he doesn't articulate it the way you want him to, does not mean that he's any less genuine. It just means that you're offended. I am not. And he's gonna be who he's gonna be. Hate it or love it.
One friend, in more blunt and less polished language, described him as blacker in spirit than a lot of actual black people he knows, and pushed back hard on anyone dismissing the whole thing as some kind of costume. Not every voice in the video is pure endorsement either. Even the people defending him tend to acknowledge up front that the whole situation is objectively strange, describing him as radical and unlike anything they had encountered before, while still landing on the position that they respect someone willing to fully commit to what they believe rather than hide it. However nice their opinions are about Nuka Zeus, it simply just complicates the picture without resolving it. It is entirely possible for someone to be a warm and likable presence to the people who actually know him, and also hold and repeat the extreme, sometimes disturbing rhetoric documented earlier in this story. Those two things are not contradictions that cancel each other out. They are just both true at once, which is exactly what makes him hard to file away neatly. Separately from the head injury, there's a more sensitive piece of his story that deserves to be handled carefully rather than treated as another beat in a highlight reel. In one video, he addresses an Instagram post from the night before referencing, apologizing to his audience, and explaining that he had been emotionally connected to missing his darker skin tone.
My bad about last night. On Instagram, I did make a post about my bad on that. I'm human, and sometimes I get in my feelings, and I be missing my skin color, you know, and a lot of people be like, why don't you make videos no more? Why aren't you making videos? Because I don't like looking at this. I have to look at this in order to make the video. I have to look at the screen. I don't like what I see. You know what I'm saying? It's just...
He describes avoiding mirrors entirely since his skin lightened again, saying he walks past them and looks at the sink instead of his own reflection while brushing his teeth, because there's nothing about his current appearance he wants to see. He contrasts this with the period when his skin was darker, when he says he could not stop looking at himself. This clearly shows he is not comfortable in his own skin.
And I really want to get my skin dark again, because honestly, like, I don't even look at the mirror, bro. Like, I walk right past the mirror. When I brush my teeth, I be looking at the damn goddamn sink. I don't be looking in the mirror. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing for me to see. There's nothing interesting for me to look at. You know what I'm saying?
The little details of the Nuka Zeus story are in their own way, as revealing as the central ones. His family, including his parents, whom other people would call white, have remained broadly supportive throughout, with their primary concern being whether the injections are physically safe, rather than the ideology surrounding them.
They were all, you know, happy that I was happy. And there's really there was no difference, really. They were just happy that I was happy. And, you know, some of them, they were like, you know, I knew I wouldn't put it past you to do something like this. And I have some screenshots I could probably share with you. I can't remember what some of my homeboys said, but I asked one of my homeboys, and through text, and I was asking him, I was like, how do you personally feel about this? And he's like, that's you, bro. That's your body. If it makes you happy, you know, all power to you, and don't listen to what everybody else says.
When black people tell him he is not actually black, he has developed a solution to the problem. He coined the term blickety black to describe his specific category, defined as somewhere between midnight black and regular black, and presented it as a genuine middle ground that should satisfy anyone not willing to call him simply black. There's also a story he told about a girlfriend who convinced him that every woman he showed interest in had transmitted infection, telling him repeatedly that a new woman had it whenever he seemed attracted to her. He said at one point he had been told that approximately 30 women he knew were affected, and it was only when he noticed the pattern that he realized she was making it up to keep him from pursuing anyone else.
How is it that every woman I come across, you know what I'm saying, all of a sudden has AIDS according to you? I'm like, I know what you're doing. You just telling me that they have AIDS because you don't want me to be with them.
He has also referenced an Film he claims exists from when he still had lighter skin, spent time discussing the fact that nobody could find it online, and eventually made a video attempting to prove its existence by showing what was clearly a staged scene with props that were, as one observer noted, both white. He later confirmed the film exists in approximately 8 hours of material. The physical journey of Nuka Zeus has not moved in a straight line. More recently, his skin has returned to a noticeably lighter tone after he reduced his tanning bed schedule and cut back on sun exposure, citing concerns about UV rays as the reason. That reversal is not something he has taken lightly based on his own account, and it connects directly to the emotional low point he described after the accident and the mirror avoidance discussed earlier. The pattern across all of this material is consistent. The skin tone was never just a cosmetic preference for him. It was tied tightly enough to his sense of self that losing it triggered a real crisis. On the days when the headaches were at their worst, he described grabbing a beer to numb the pain. Between the head injury, the unaddressed elevated vitals, and the emotional weight tied to his appearance, this stretch of his story reads less like a punchline and more like a person who has spent years without much of a support system that could actually intervene. His stated identity has not changed alongside his skin tone. He still describes his spirit as having always been black and frames his current lighter appearance as a temporary interruption rather than a permanent reversal. In his own framework, the soul does not change because the tanning schedule slipped. What the Nuka Zeus story resists is the clean ending where someone gets what they deserve, learns something, and the record shows accountability. None of those things has happened in any verifiable way. He has not faced documented legal consequences for the violent rhetoric described in his interviews. He has not received any formal medical intervention for the drug use or the head injury. His family remains supportive. His online presence continues, and his content still generates views from people who find the whole project genuinely fascinating and from people who find it genuinely alarming, often simultaneously. The black community has had a complicated relationship with him throughout. Some people who spent time around him, including the friends and acquaintances who spoke on camera about knowing him personally, have said that once you know him, you like him, that he is humble and genuine and cares about the cause. Others have pointed out that a person can be personally likable and still say things that are harmful and untrue. He came back from Africa when his father got sick. He keeps returning to America when he says he wants to leave it permanently. He will not give up Smash Brothers. He cannot stop saying, "You know what I'm saying." He has children he will not discuss. He has a documentary he has been promising for years that has not materialized.
Well, I mean, I want to go back to Africa.
Why'd you come back to America?
My dad got sick.
Oh, okay.
And the doctors didn't know what was going on, and he was sick for. I mean, he's still downhill. He's just, at that age, I guess, it's just downhill from now.
Nuka Zeus.
What is left is not a clean, cautionary tale about extremism, or a redemption arc about someone finding themselves, or even a straightforward story about a lolcow collapsing under the weight of his own contradictions. What is left is a man who has spent years trying to make his outside match his inside, who built a public persona around extreme ideology while also being someone people find oddly compelling when they sit down and talk to him, and who has more than once shown real and unresolved distress underneath all of it. The injections are still there as an option whenever he wants to go back to the tanning beds. The tattoos are permanent, the name is legal. The soul, he says, has always been exactly what it is.